Welcome to Deceived by Pharmakeia, Part 1. This is a 3-part series. Part 1 is God's preparation for the end-time health war. It's an eye-opening presentation that tells the story of the global health reform movement God raised up in preparation to counteract the counterfeit healthcare systems of Pharmakeia. He armed this movement with advanced health principles that both prevented and reversed disease without drugs. Then he commanded this movement to showcase this better way by building their own worldwide health institutions, starting with the Battle Creek Sanitarium, which you see in this image here. The contrast was as night and day. It proved to be the greatest healthcare facility the world has ever known, and the world came to this temple of health like the Queen of Sheba came to Solomon. This 3-part series parallels the rise and shocking, heartbreaking fall of that magnificent health reform movement in its struggles to release men from the deceptions of Pharmakeia. But God is now raising up, in power, a grassroots revival of that movement to again show men the better way. Even now, in the very pinnacle of Pharmakeia's controlling power, all who will may find safety and healing in God's better way. Let's give you a quick description of both Part 2 and Part 3. Part 2, Deceived by Pharmakeia, caught in its snare. It will include a side-by-side comparison of the two healthcare systems. It will tell the story of the incalculable loss to the world when that great health reform movement ventured onto forbidden ground and got caught in the snares of Pharmakeia. And then it describes the spiritual and medical madness that followed. Part 3, for such a time as this. This will address the prophetic end-time health war currently being waged against all nations in the name and guise of benevolent medical science. To prevail in this war, we must understand the weapons being used against us and the true spiritual nature and agenda of the escalating war. As man's health laws conflict with God's health laws, health and forced drugging have become the most agitated topics on planet Earth, making God's health laws present truth. And it's about time. Also, a testing truth in these last hours of our probation. The events of the pandemic were just the opening acts, folks. Prophecy tells us of much worse to come. God intended, I believe that God intended that those events be a wake-up call for what's coming next. He has specified what we are to do, and he is calling us back to active duty for such a time as this. All right, back to Part 1, God's preparation for the end-time health war. A time of great medical ignorance. In the mid-19th century, disease and its cure was a mystery. They used things like bloodletting, purging, poisoning, leeches. Night air was considered dangerous. Bathing was a health risk. Tomatoes were thought to be poison. Real poisons were considered curative. Tobacco, mercury, arsenic, strychnine, etc. Drinking blood and eating raw meat was supposed to build good blood. Corsets squeezed the life out of fashionable women. Sanitation was unknown. The average age of death in 1848 was about 38. Disease and suffering was made worse in part by the onslaught of the Industrial Revolution, when families left their natural estate of country living and agriculture in favor of factory work in the sunless, crowded, disease-filled cities. Consumption was raging. Infectious diseases abounded and man had no answers. Disease was a mystery. It was in this setting that God commissioned the great health reform movement. Health reform is born. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants the prophets. Amos 3:7. You may have noticed a certain pattern in the Bible. At the beginning and end of every biblical prophecy, God raises up a prophet. Abraham was given the prophecy that his descendants would be in bondage for 400 years in Egypt. As that 400 years of slavery was drawing to an end, God raised up the prophet Moses to end the bondage of Abraham's descendants. Second example, the prophet Daniel was called by God to announce the start of a prophetic 70-week prophecy which foretold the time of Christ's baptism, his crucifixion, and when the gospel would be taken to the Gentiles as the Jews would reject it. As that prophecy was about to be fulfilled, God raised up John the Baptist to prepare the people for Christ's ministry. Third example, the prophet Daniel was also used to announce the very last time traceable prophecy in the Bible, the larger 2300-day prophecy that foretold the beginning of the investigative judgment of all mankind, which would start in 1844. As the event foretold approached as expected, God raised up another prophet to prepare the world for Christ's return. A large part of that preparation for Christ's return was health reform, believe it or not, down to the minutest detail. This is excerpted from the Ellen G. White Estate. As Daniel's 2300-day prophecy concluded and the investigative judgment of mankind was beginning, God called a sickly, shy, uneducated 17-year-old girl named Ellen White to his service as an end-time prophet. God intentionally called the weakest of the weak to that office, that his strength may be perfect in weakness. Providence ordained that she receive no more than a third-grade education, so that none may conclude that her writings were of her own devising. Ellen White received an estimated 2,000 divinely inspired visions and prophetic dreams during her 70 years of public ministry. She is the most translated female writer in the world. She is the most translated American author, male or female. She wrote volumes on subjects she had never studied. She taught principles and scientific knowledge unknown to the most learned men of her day, but now proven scientific fact. She was considered to be 50 to 100 years ahead of her time. Subjects included health and temperance, lifestyle, stewardship, education, religion, social relationships, race issues, evangelism, prophecy, publishing, nature, psychology, and more. Ellen White was a much in-demand public speaker by Adventists and non-Adventists alike, especially on matters of health and temperance. At the time of her death in 1915, 24 of her books were in circulation, with 2 more ready for publication. 5,000 articles for various publications had been written by her. 200 different tracts and pamphlets of hers had been published. 100,000 pages of total literary output had been written by her. 50 compilations of her writings have been produced since her death. She was a co-founder of numerous sanitariums, colleges, and publishing houses around the world. By the way, when she was first called to write books from the visions, she pled with the angel that she didn't know how to write. So what was the angel's response to her? It was simple. She just said, read. God didn't just bestow that ability on her, but he blessed her efforts as she read, as she learned. The most beautiful, compelling writings I have ever read are from Ellen G. White. And many other people say the same thing. To the law and to the testimony, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. Isaiah 8:20. All prophets are to be tested and measured by the word of God. Ellen White is never to be placed above the Bible. If there's a seeming disagreement, the Bible wins. If the Bible is the master architect's blueprint, then Ellen White is the architect's additional details that make clearer the original blueprints. She's the telescope that magnifies and brings into clearer focus the stars which are already there. Any new light she was given was in harmony with the Word of God. Her mission was to lead men and women to the greater light. Her very first health-related visions are described below. Exactly 4 years after the investigative judgment began in the autumn of 1844, God sent the first health-related vision to the Advent believers through Ellen White in 1848. She was simply shown in this very small first vision that tea, coffee, and tobacco were injurious, even life-threatening. Even life-threatening. Tea and coffee, life-threatening. I didn't say that, God did. Tea and coffee was the first light given from God on health. That ought to tell us something. This little vision was to be followed by others in God's timing. It was the beginning of the great Adventist health reform movement, although it was not yet known to be so. 6 years later, on February 12, 1854, she was given a bit more health information. She was shown two things. There was a physically dangerous lack of bodily cleanliness among Sabbath keepers. Isn't that interesting? The control of appetite was sorely needed among them. Those two things. 9 years after that, on Friday night, June 6, 1863, during worship service at the home of Aaron Hilliard in Otsego, Michigan, only 16 days after the believers became incorporated as the Seventh-day Adventist Church, God gave the first comprehensive health vision, which would begin to outline God's hygienic health principles. There would be more. The contents of that comprehensive health vision can be found in the book Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4A, Chapter 39, entitled Health. This vision included the ominous, voluminous, crystal clear warnings against the use of pharmaceutical drugs. A year and a half later, on Christmas Day, 1865, God gave the second major health vision, fourth overall, and the Adventists were then instructed to start their own hygienic health institutions for the treatment and education of the sick using God's advanced principles of health reform without the use of drugs. Adventists responded to God's command, and in 1866, the Western Health Reform Institute opened for business in Battle Creek, Michigan. It would later be known as the Battle Creek Sanitarium. There's a reason why I lay these facts out, because it helps diffuse error and misunderstanding. It's not the most interesting, but it's laid out, and we need to go through it. Almost done. The reason Battle Creek Sanitarium existed. As the matter was laid open before me, she says, and the sad burden of the result of drug medication, the light was given me that Seventh-day Adventists should establish health institutions discarding all these health-destroying inventions. And physicians should treat the sick upon hygienic principles. Remembering that an ounce of preventive is of more value than a pound of cure. Lectures and studies in this line will prove of the highest values. We were called from the beginning to release men from the deceptions of drug use. Through the support of James and Ellen White, John Harvey Kellogg attended medical school and was hired at the Institute in 1875. It had only 12 patients housed in several small two-story buildings and was in dire financial condition. He quickly turned things around. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg was the medical director of the Battle Creek Sanitarium for 67 years. He was the father of the health food industry. And yes, Dr. Kellogg and his brother were the inventors of flaked breakfast cereal, Kellogg's Corn Flakes. He was a pioneer in light therapeutics, author of 50 medical books, prolific inventor and innovator, public speaker, world-renowned surgeon, considered to be the greatest physician in our world. That was Ellen White that said that in a letter to Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. And I'm absolutely convinced it's true. In 1878, this was the new building. They had changed the name to the Battle Creek Sanitarium. This rapidly expanded into that. This is what it looked like just before the 1902 fire that burned that whole thing down. 4 a.m. Tuesday, February 18, 1902. Look what they built in just 15 months. The dedication of the new Battle Creek Sanitarium, May 31, 1903. 15 months. The new wood-free sanitarium building, this is the bird's eye view of it. Massive institution there. In 1928, they added that tower to it. Battle Creek Sanitarium is to the left, just to the left of those cars. General Conference Office was to the left, Review and Herald to the right, just across the street. We were congregating, which we were not supposed to do. Now, this is from Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, quoted in the preface of Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene. The world-famous Battle Creek Sanitarium attributed their overall success as an institution to a systematic and harmonious body of hygienic truths, free from patent errors and consistent with the Bible and the principles of Christian religion. He's talking about Ellen White's writings. Dr. Kellogg stated that the principles in that system have been put to the test of practical experience by thousands, and thousands have testified to physical, mental, and moral benefits received. The reformatory movement and the institutions developed by it have grown to be the most extensive and the most prosperous establishments of the sort in the world. And all this was achieved while avoiding the use of drugs. Battle Creek Sanitarium was the standard for all other institutions. That's why I tell their stories. The next slides show the 8 core elements of God's hygienic healthcare system, outlined by Ellen White. There were actually about 16 that Ellen White talked about, but these are just the basic 8 that helped form the foundation for the rest. Pure air. Breathing exercises, exercise in the open air, sleeping in the open air, window tents, and nature outings were all prescribed as part of the healing remedy. Okay, moving on. Sunlight. Patients were encouraged to get as much sunlight as possible. Open-air gymnasiums were available for this purpose, such as you see here, and even man-made sunlight was available in their phototherapy departments. This is Dr. Kellogg quoted. There seems to be good reason to believe that lack of direct contact with the sunlight accounts for much of the debility, feebleness, and frailty that prevails so widely among the people. To keep fit, one must live outdoors in the sunshine and fresh air as much as possible. The Battle Creek, this is interesting. I'm going to contrast here. The Battle Creek Sanitarium was, 1, the greatest hygienic healthcare institution that has ever been. Number 2, was the largest and most well-equipped. Number 3, had the greatest physician in our world. Number 4 was raised up at God's command, had a prophet of the Lord reigning over it or advising. Number 5 had over 1,000 different kinds of baths and therapies. Yet sunlight was considered to be one of their most effective treatments. Can't improve on God's methods. Abstemiousness. Abstemiousness is an older word for self-control / temperance. Tea, coffee, tobacco, and alcohol we must present as sinful indulgences, said Ellen White. That's right. True temperance teaches us to dispense entirely with everything hurtful. There are few who realize, as they should, how much their habits of diet have to do with their health, their character, their usefulness in this world, and their eternal destiny. The appetite should ever be in subjection to the moral and intellectual powers, frontal lobe. The body should be servant to the mind and not the mind to the body. Whatever injures the health not only lessens physical vigor, but tends to weaken the mental and moral powers. Indulgence in any unhealthful practice makes it more difficult for one to discriminate between right and wrong, and hence more difficult to resist evil. Thus, the need for health reform in these end times during the judgment. Rest. Sanitarium promoted regular sleep hours, 8 hours per night, sleeping in the dark with windows open on an empty stomach. Exercise. Patients were prescribed regular exercise, especially outdoors, and had many activities to choose from. Battle Creek Sanitarium promoted whole, plant-based food, fresh from the garden, eaten judiciously at regular intervals, no less than 3 to 6 hours before bedtime, 2 meals better than 3, and no snacking, no in-between meals. God is trying to lead us back step by step to his original design that man should subsist upon the natural products of the earth. That does not include meat. The use of water. Hydrotherapy was a major modality at the sanitarium. It was the core of the successful Spanish flu treatment. Trust in divine power. God does the healing. Only God's system is effective and safe. Everything else is a counterfeit. All patients were treated by default with these agencies. They both prevented and reversed disease. And the first task was to ascertain the cause of the illness, the deficiencies in these lifestyle habits. Their focus was to strengthen the body's defenses rather than attack disease, the war on disease. Dr. Kellogg took those advanced principles and he placed them on a scientific basis, then turned them into a public health education movement, which he branded with the name Biologic Living. He was known the world all over for this. It summed up the system of healthful living that taught obedience to natural law as a moral duty necessary to physical, mental, and spiritual health. It was a healing lifestyle that both prevented and reversed disease. Dr. Kellogg summed it up like this. He says, biologic living means health, comfort, efficiency, long life. It means good digestion, sound sleep, a clear head, a placid mind, contentment and joy to be alive. Close to nature is a safe place, a haven of rest and peace where one may breathe the air of heaven and freedom, may feel the thrill of vital joys and hear the music of the spheres. The simple life is not an innovation. It is a return to the old paths from which the perversions of our modern civilization have gradually diverted millions of men and women, perversions that are responsible for the multitudinous maladies and degeneracy which yearly multiply in number and gravity. In a conversation with this is interesting. In a conversation with a visiting physician, Dr. Kellogg asked, "Do you know how it is that the Battle Creek Sanitarium is able to keep 5 years ahead of the medical profession?" And he answers his own question here. "When a new thing is brought out in the medical world, I know from my knowledge of Ellen White's writings whether it belongs in our system or not. If it does, I instantly adopt it and advertise it while the rest of the doctors are slowly feeling their way. And when they finally adopt it, I have 5 years start on them. On the other hand," he says, "when the medical profession is swept off their feet by some new fad, if it does not fit the light we have received, I simply do not touch it. When the doctors finally discover their mistake, they wonder how it came to be that I did not get caught." Kellogg said, "I know from my knowledge of Ellen White's writings whether it belongs in our system or not." That's how a bank teller detects counterfeit bills, by studying the authentic. We don't have to study all the different methods of worldly healing, just God's methods. It will keep us from being caught in the numberless snares of pharmakeia. We have an owner's manual. We will know which health claims and modalities of God and which are not of God if we study the authentic. Speaking to the delegates at the 1897 conference, Dr. Kellogg stated, it is impossible for any man who has not made a special study of medicine to appreciate the wonderful character of the instruction that has been received in these writings, Ellen White's writings. There is not a single principle in relation to the healthful development of our bodies and minds that is advocated in these writings from Sister White, which I am not prepared to demonstrate conclusively from scientific evidence. Science is used to vindicate God's word. It does not replace God's word. So what would be the effect if all these remedies were used together systematically and intelligently? We'll use draft horses to illustrate the effect. If one draft horse can drag up to 4 tons, 8,000 pounds, then how many tons could 2 draft horses drag? Well, that would be 4 plus 4 equals 8. 8 tons, right? Well, 2 draft horses can drag up to 12 tons. What happened to 4 plus 4 equals 8? Wait, there is more. Trained up together, these horses can drag 16 tons, 4 times the amount what one horse could drag with just 2 horses. That is called synergy. The power of synergy lies in the fact that multiplication, not addition, takes place when working as a team. God's provisions for health and healing were designed to be used together, synergistically. His agencies multiply each other's effectiveness with no side effects at all. It was the strength of the Battle Creek Sanitarium. It's why men and women of wealth and influence frequented the sanitarium. That being said, it is the Lord's plan that men and women of wealth and influence shall feel a safety in a sanitarium where prayer is offered up to God. They are to see that there is a people in the world having talent and knowledge who are not vain and self-exalted, who follow the pattern Christ has given. Seventh-day Adventists are to be represented in our world by the advanced principles of health reform which God has given us. When was the last time that's happened? Well, it's coming up. The next section is about how men and women of wealth and influence responded to Adventists when they were known for their advanced principles of health reform. The greatest minds of the industrial age were drawn to these healing principles. Whether they were righteous or whether they were unrighteous, they recognized the hand of divinity in all this. They recognized the effectiveness of this. Our golden age of Solomon. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Matthew 5:14. So one function of the health message is to draw the public. Ellen White tells us how. The Lord would have medical missionary work and the gospel ministry combined. And what a work might be done in any place of the world. The medical missionary work is the gospel practiced. And all ministers who could combine with the gospel ministry the work of the gospel medical missionary would be doubly useful. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath God so near unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great, that has statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Deuteronomy 4:5-8. That being said, 1 Kings 10:1-4-5. When the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with hard questions. And when she had seen all Solomon's wisdom and the house that he had built, there was no more spirit in her. The next story is about Yale University coming to Dr. Kellogg at his Temple of Health in Battle Creek to prove the effectiveness of God's healing principles with hard tests. Have you heard of this? In 1906, Professor Irvine Fisher of Yale University conducted endurance studies on meat-eating male student athletes from Yale. He then did the same studies on young male vegetarian staff at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. They were not required to be athletes, but just as long as they had some sort of regular physical activities. The contrast between Yale and Battle Creek was wonderfully shocking. Here is the test. The first one, hold out your arms as long as possible. Yale versus Sanitarium. The average minutes between these two groups for holding their hands out, the whole group, 10 minutes. That was for the Yale carnivores. 49 minutes, that's 5 times more. 49 minutes for the vegetarian sanitarium staff. Maximum minutes of any one subject, Yale, 22 minutes, he held out his hands. Our guy, 200 minutes. No comparison. All right, the number of subjects that exceeded 15 minutes, 13% versus 69%. 30 minutes, 0%, or 47% of the sanitarium staff. The number of subjects that exceeded 1 hour, 0%, and 28% for the vegetarians. This next one, the number of subjects that exceeded 3 hours, 0 for Yale, and 3.1% for sanitarium staff. That 3.1 was one guy. We had a champion. The moral of this story, hire vegetarians. The next test was deep knee bends. Yale did a total of, their abilities totaled about 57.45 hours of work. The sanitarium vegetarian staff, 205 hours of work. Same moral, hire vegetarians. The sanitarium vegetarians had 9 times the endurance of the flesh eaters in the arm tests and 4 times the endurance in the leg tests. Daniel 1. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore, he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, just 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat, vegetables, and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them vegetables. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days, 3 years, that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in his entire realm. Now that is an advertisement for health reform. The next slide tells what happened when a famous Olympic swimmer tried Daniel's pulse diet at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Some of us older folks will remember this. The young definitely won't. Johnny Weissmuller, he was an Olympic champion swimmer and one of the best known Tarzan actors ever. He came to Battle Creek to dedicate the sanitarium's new 120-foot swimming pool. After following a vegetarian diet prescribed by Dr. Kellogg, Weissmuller broke his previous record, swimming 300 meters in 3 minutes and 33.6 seconds. A record he had tried to break for several years. He had broken 54 world records. Then they cry unto the Lord in their trouble, and he saveth them out of their distresses. He sent his word and healed them, and delivered them from their destruction. Oh, that men would praise the Lord for his goodness, and for his wonderful works to the children of men. Psalms 107:19. The next story is about J.C. Penney when he cried out to the Lord at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. The story is about 4 minutes, and quite often it tears me up, and I try to resist it. All right, here we go. James Cash Penney received a miracle of healing at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. As told in his autobiography, 50 Years with the Golden Rule, Mr. Penney lost more than $40 million in the financial collapse of 1929-1932. Most of these funds were lost in attempting to save other companies and philanthropic programs that were facing bankruptcy. What crushed him most were the vicious attacks on his moral responsibility and cherished reputation. Though still chairman of the board of the J.C. Penney Company, at 56, he was almost broke. The fruits of a lifetime of labor had been swept away in a few short months. His wife and children had already been sent to Arizona with grandparents because there were no funds to care for them at home. This is J.C. Penney. Penny, now near physical and nervous breakdown, was scheduled to speak at a noon luncheon in Battle Creek, Michigan, where he met an old friend who was a staff physician at Battle Creek Sanitarium. Mr. Penny asked to be examined, and it was discovered that his whole right side was aggravated with a severe case of shingles, besides other indications of a very sick man. The physician admitted him to the sanitarium with day and night nurses attending him. One of Penny's chief worries was that he did not have enough money to pay for the medical services. But who would believe him? He's J.C. Penney. Besides, the thought deepened that he was coming to the end of his life. On that fateful night, he was overwhelmed with the feeling that he would not awaken to another day. Things that he wanted to say to his wife and children, he wrote down in what he thought would be his last letter to them. After sealing the envelope, he turned out the light, knowing that in his exhaustion, he would not be alive in the morning. But he recalls that in that early morning hours, when he awakened, it was a strange kind of surprise. He was not pleased. He felt restless and apprehension. Vaguely, he thought of breakfast. Wandering down the hall toward the dining room, he felt enclosed in an immense loneliness, but the dining room was not yet open. He stood in the hallway in an emptiness that seemed to me to have no horizon, said Mr. Penny. But then occurred the miracle of Christian grace of godly men and women. Up the corridor drifted the lines of an old familiar hymn. Be not dismayed, whate'er betide, God will take care of you. Penny found himself moving slowly towards the sound. The music and words became clearer. All you may need, He will provide. God will take care of you. Lonely and sad from friends apart, no matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. He found the chapel door and sank into a back seat. Lean, weary one, upon his breast. God will take care of you. Quietly, one of the workers read a passage from the Bible. Come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Penny groaned freely and without effort prayed, Lord, I can do nothing. Will you take care of me? Suddenly something happened. I can't explain it, he said. I can only call it a miracle. I felt as if I had been instantly lifted out of the darkness of a dungeon into warm, brilliant sunlight. I felt as if I had been transported from hell to paradise. I felt the power of God as I had never felt it before. I realized then that I alone was responsible for all my troubles. I knew that God, with His love, was there to help me. From that day to this, my life has been free from worry. The most dramatic and glorious minutes of my life were those I spent in that chapel that morning. God will take care of you. From that moment, I began to improve. When Christian nurses, physicians, and other health workers sing and pray, a shaft of hope enters the dismal halls of pain and despair. There is nothing like it anywhere. No painkiller, no sedation could restore a man like J.C. Penney to hope and new life. But a Christian hymn, a few biblical verses, and dedicated hearts could. Try it. Someone may be listening to may have written his last letter. Oh, that was a beautiful story, wasn't it? All right, next story. Now, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born the King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. Well, as the wise men from the east recognized the import of that divine light and followed it to Bethlehem, so this next wise man from the east recognized the import of the divine light shining out of Battle Creek and followed it. You will know this name, Mahatma Gandhi. Do you know who this man is? Let me tell you a little bit about him. Mohandas Gandhi was an Indian lawyer who employed non-violent resistance to lead the successful campaign for India's independence from British rule, and in turn inspired movements for civil rights and freedoms across the world. That's a lesson for us. And of course, he was assassinated for it in 1948. But while he was alive, Gandhi corresponded with Dr. Kellogg about dietary questions. Really? Gandhi said something rather shocking in the next slide that relates to this. He says, the present practice of medicine is the concentrated essence of black magic. That belief explains why Gandhi felt the need to reach out nearly 9,000 miles across an ocean to consult with Dr. Kellogg at the Adventist Sanitarium in Battle Creek, because there was nothing else like it. The present practice of medicine that Gandhi referred to was allopathic medicine. Both he and the Adventist Sanitarium avoided it, and here's why. I know that was allopathic medicine because I checked. That's what he was referring to. All right, here's why. Restorative power is not in drugs. This is from Ellen White. Restorative power is not in drugs, but in nature. Disease? It's an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of laws of health. It's simple. In case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. Unhealthy conditions changed. Wrong habits corrected. Then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to reestablish right conditions in the system. God's system is so simple. She continues, it is true that drugs sometimes afford present relief, and the patient appears to recover as a result of their use. This is simply because nature has sufficient vital force to expel the poison and to correct the conditions that caused the disease. Some have sufficient vital force to do that. But in most cases, the drug only changes the form and location of the disease. Often the effect of the poison seems to be overcome for a time, but the results remain in the system and work great harm at some later period. This is Ellen White's words, but it didn't initiate with her. This was given to her via vision from God. Works great harm at some later period. By the use of poisonous drugs, many bring upon themselves lifelong illness, and many lives are lost that might be saved by the use of natural methods of healing. We need to get this message out. For example, mercury, calomel, and quinine have brought their amount of wretchedness, which the day of God alone will fully reveal. Preparations of mercury and calomel is a preparation of mercury, taken into the system, get this, ever retain their poisonous strength as long as there is a particle of it left in the system. Now she's going to describe what that damage could be. These poisonous preparations, mercury, have destroyed their millions, and that was way back then, and left sufferers upon the earth to linger out a miserable existence. All are better off without these dangerous mixtures. Miserable sufferers with disease in almost every form, misshapen by suffering with dreadful ulcers and pains in the bones, loss of teeth, loss of memory, and impaired sight are to be seen almost everywhere. They are victims of poisonous preparations which have been, in many cases, administered to cure some slight indisposition, which after a day or two of fasting would have disappeared without medicine. But poisonous mixtures administered by physicians have proved their ruin. The Battle Creek Sanitarium existed to show the world the better way without drugs. And the brightest minds of the industrial age were drawn to that better way and visited the Battle Creek Sanitarium. These 4 men, they all visited the sanitarium. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, President Warren Harding, Harvey Firestone. There were many more, but we're going to go show just a few, relative few. Yeah, Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean in June 1928. Twice was a guest of Dr. John Harvey Kellogg at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. On September 8, 1931, she flew into Battle Creek in an autogyro, a combination helicopter/airplane. Because Kellogg was interested in flying, Miss Earhart took him for a 10-minute ride the next day. It was wonderful, Kellogg said afterward. She said, and he was a good passenger, she added, which is a polite way of saying he did not toss his cookies while flying. Mary Todd Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln's wife, she was admitted to the sanitarium for mental breakdown. Ilyich Mechnikov, I don't know how to pronounce it. This fellow was the father of natural immunity and grandfather of probiotics. This is the man that started the whole gut microbiome idea. He was the reason Dr. Kellogg gave his patients probiotics. And the world is just now catching on to this and claiming that it is a very new science. No, it wasn't. This lady right here, Sojourner Truth, she is so special. I read a bit of her history. She's the only one I'm not giving a description for. And here's why. Upon reading the inspiration of who this remarkable servant of God really was, I cannot will myself to define her in any one sentence or two. It would be an insult to God and her to try. She is not a minor footnote in history. And Battle Creek was honored by her presence there for over a quarter of a century. I recommend you read her biography. Dr. Scholl, foot doctor to the world. You're familiar with him? This guy, S.S. Kresge, founder of Kmart. So that's what K stands for, Kresge. I believe they used to be called Kresge stores, and there they were, even in my lifetime. Dale Carnegie, famous for How to Win Friends and Influence People, the book. He visited the sanitarium, all these. Even the Goodyear blimp paid a visit to the Miami Battle Creek Sanitarium. And there's an interesting story behind that. Behind that building, Miami Battle Creek Sanitarium. I will tell you. First, we start with this Bible text. Proverbs 22:29 says, "Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men." Interesting. Because Dr. Kellogg was known the world over for his advanced principles of health reform, this amazing Florida hotel was sold to him for just $10 as a branch of the Battle Creek Sanitarium. It was called the Miami Battle Creek. President Howard Taft. Notice John Harvey Kellogg on the platform? President William Howard Taft was the 100,000th guest to the sanitarium. The visit to Battle Creek was part of a 13,000-mile train tour of the 46 states. The crowd, estimated at 40,000, included 4,000 school children excused from classes to participate in the event. Taft gave a speech at the Michigan Central Station. Then, accompanied by Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, dressed in white and seated behind the president, he was given a tour of the Battle Creek Sanitarium. We were known for our advanced principles of health reform. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of President Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Dr. Charles and William Mayo with Dr. Kellogg. Doctors William and Charles Mayo credited their friend Dr. Kellogg with the idea for their now famous Mayo Clinic. The Mayo brothers were strong admirers of Dr. Kellogg and visited him several occasions to observe his surgical procedures. We had an influence, folks. Charles E. Welch, founder of Welch's grape juice. In 1938, a news report indicated that grape juice producer Edgar Welch had visited the sanitarium 32 times. Welch advocated grape juice as a healthy remedy, as does the Bible. The Pavlov Physiological Institute of Battle Creek Sanitarium. Remember Psychology 101 in college? Remember Pavlov and the drooling dogs? That's what this was. Nobel Prize-winning Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov, best known for getting dogs to drool upon ringing a bell, basically had a branch office at the Battle Creek Sanitarium research facility. Kellogg knew what he was doing. Admiral Richard Byrd. He's the famous Navy explorer which conducted the first expeditions to reach both the North and the South Pole by air. He counseled with Dr. Kellogg about diet before making his expeditions. And he credited Dr. Kellogg with saving his life when he was a patient at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Booker T. Washington and his Battle Creek Sanitarium light bath cabinet. This guy is amazing as well. He was the founder of the Tuskegee Institute. Booker Taliaferro, never knew that. Booker T. Washington, April 5, 1856, November 14, 1915, was an American educator, author, orator, and advisor to presidents of the United States. Between 1890 and 1915, Washington was the dominant leader in the African American community. In 1881, Mr. Washington founded a school which would eventually become the Tuskegee Institute. Mr. Washington owned one of Dr. Kellogg's incandescent electric light bath cabinets shown here at his home. He was also a visitor at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Clara Barton, the famous pioneering American nurse who founded the American Red Cross. She was a hospital nurse in the American Civil War. Dr. Kellogg visited her in Washington, D.C. There's stories behind that, but I'm kind of running out of time here. Oh, I gotta tell you, it's inspiring. In a 1912 speech at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, Dr. Kellogg said, "I happened to be in Washington at a Battle Creek Sanitarium banquet that was given by a grateful patient, and Clara Barton was one of the guests of honor at this banquet. I met her there, and she listened with very much interest, apparently for an hour, when I gave a presentation to the people who had gathered there, most of them people of considerable note, members of the foreign industries, and others who had been invited by Mrs. Henderson. I told them about Battle Creek Sanitarium principles." How marvelous. C.W. Barron, The Wall Street Journal. John D. Rockefeller, he was an industrialist, philanthropist, and oil man of Standard Oil. Rockefeller was a regular at the SAN. He, like Dr. Kellogg, was greatly interested in nutrition and preventative medicine. He was also a faithful subscriber to the doctor's monthly publication, Good Health. Leo Tolstoy. He was famous for writing the great novel War and Peace. In 1873, Tolstoy set to work on the second of his best-known novels, Anna Karenina. Tolstoy was a visitor to the Battle Creek Sanitarium and became a vegetarian in 1885. Tolstoy was nominated for the first Nobel Peace Prize in Literature in 1901, which he rejected, by the way. George Bernard Shaw. He was awarded Nobel Prize. He's sitting here with Dr. Kellogg at the Miami Battle Creek. awarded Nobel Prize in Literature in 1925. A strong vegetarian advocate with Dr. Kellogg at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Perhaps his best-known work was Pygmalion in 1912, later turned into a movie called My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn. This is going to seem unrelated, but I'll make the connection. This quote from the Bible, "Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images. And ye shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless thy bread and thy water, and I will take sickness away from the midst of thee." Well, there's a conclusion to be had about this. Apparently, abandoning our forbidden, cherished idols has something to do with health and healing. The false gods in the text could just as well be referring to the counterfeit systems of healing, which God forbids. Only God's methods offer true health and healing, as demonstrated in the 1918 Spanish flu in the next slide. The 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, also known as H1N1 swine flu, has been described as the greatest medical holocaust in history. It had 4 waves and lasted 15 months, killing an estimated 17 to 100 million worldwide, with a global mortality rate estimated at 10 to 20% of those infected. Yet there were some medical institutions, guess who, that had fewer deaths than others, far fewer deaths than others, some approaching nearly 100% recovery rate, like the Battle Creek Sanitarium and her sisters. The institutions with the greatest success were those that were known for their advanced principles of health reform. And I know that I have another presentation on that topic about that when the pandemics come. That's what it's called, when the pandemics come. The institutions with the greatest success were those that were known for their advanced principles of health reform. All right, Deuteronomy 28:13, "And the Lord shall make thee the head and not the tail. And thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath." He's making it clear. "If that thou hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I command thee this day to observe and to do." What we had was amazing. It's not going to be in such a grand thing anymore, but there's a grassroots movement bringing this back. Several of them that I'm aware of. That is the end of this presentation. The next one, I'm going to remind you what number 2 is about. Part 2 includes a side-by-side comparison of the 2 healthcare systems, Pharmakeia and God's healthcare. It also tells the story of the incalculable loss to the world when that great health reform movement ventured onto forbidden ground and got caught in the snares of Pharmakeia. It describes the spiritual and medical madness that followed. All right, thank you. That is the end of this presentation.